People always ask me if I believe in ghosts. I never know how to answer. Because what happened at Blackwood Motel wasn't the kind of thing you can explain with words like ghost or spirit. Those words make it sound almost harmless, like an old family story people tell around a campfire. Whatever was inside that motel wasn't harmless. And I know that because I was alone with it for 7 hours. This happened in October 2018. At the time, I was 26 years old and desperate for work. My construction job had ended unexpectedly, and after nearly 2 months of searching, I had almost no money left. Every morning I checked online job listings before sunrise, hoping something, anything, would appear. One afternoon I found an advertisement looking for a night receptionist at a roadside motel called Blackwood Motel. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover my rent. The ad mentioned that the previous employee had quit without notice, and they needed someone immediately. That should have been my first warning. The motel sat nearly 15 miles outside the nearest town, surrounded by dense pine forest. The only road leading there stretched through miles of empty countryside with no houses, no gas stations, and almost no traffic after sunset. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon. The place looked older than the photographs online. Its faded green sign leaned slightly to one side, with several letters missing. One of the windows had been boarded up with plywood, and vines climbed across the walls as if nature had slowly started reclaiming the building. Still, it looked clean enough. An elderly man stepped out of the office before I even parked. He introduced himself as Walter. He had deep wrinkles, tired blue eyes, and a limp that made every step look painful. "You must be Daniel," he said. I nodded. He shook my hand firmly but didn't smile. "I appreciate you coming." Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of old wood, coffee, and something damp that I couldn't identify. Walter showed me around. The office contained an ancient computer, a key cabinet, several security monitors, and a small coffee machine that looked older than both of us. The motel had only 18 rooms. Most of them were empty. "How busy do you get?" I asked. Walter looked away for a second. "Not very." That answer seemed honest enough. He handed me a ring of keys. "Your shift starts tomorrow at 6 in the evening. Anything special I should know?" He hesitated. "There are rules." I laughed. "Every job has rules." "No," he said quietly. "These are different." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It looked old, almost yellow. At the top someone had written, "Night shift rules." I expected normal instructions. Lock the office. Count the cash drawer. Answer customer calls. Instead I read something that made absolutely no sense. Rule 1. Never rent room 8 after midnight. Rule 2. If someone asks for room 8, tell them it is under renovation. Do not argue. Rule 3. If the hallway camera freezes between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m., do not attempt to fix it. Rule 4. Never leave the office during those 4 minutes. Rule 5. If the telephone rings exactly 3 times and stops, unplug it until sunrise. Rule 6. If you hear someone knocking on the office window after 3 a.m., do not look outside. Rule 7. If room 11's lights turn on by themselves, leave immediately. Do not collect your belongings. Do not return before daylight. I stared at the paper. Then I looked at Walter. He wasn't smiling. Is this some kind of joke? No. I waited. Nothing. He simply watched me. Finally I laughed. I've worked construction sites where people loved pulling pranks. Walter folded the paper carefully. I've owned this motel for 31 years. His voice had changed. Quiet. Heavy. I've buried 2 employees. The room suddenly felt colder. I searched his face for any sign that he was joking. There wasn't one. What happened? They broke the rules. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to walk away. Another part reminded me that my bank account contained less than $80. I accepted the job. The next evening I arrived 15 minutes early. Walter was waiting. He spent about an hour teaching me the basics. How to check guests in. Where the spare keys were. How to operate the security cameras. At exactly 6 o'clock he picked up his coat. I leave at sunset. You never stay overnight? No. Why? He looked toward the parking lot. The nights belonged to something else. Then he left. His truck disappeared down the empty road. I watched until the headlights vanished into the trees. Suddenly the motel became incredibly quiet. No voices. No traffic. Only the wind. At 7:30 a middle-aged couple checked in. They were driving across the state and needed somewhere to sleep. I gave them room 4. Around 8 another man arrived driving a pickup truck. Room 2. Everything felt perfectly normal. By 10 o'clock the parking lot contained only 3 vehicles. The television played quietly behind the reception desk while I drank stale coffee and scrolled through my phone. I almost laughed at myself for believing Walter's strange rules. Around 11:30 the office phone rang. I answered. Silence. Not static. Not breathing. Just complete silence. Hello. Nothing. After almost 20 seconds the line disconnected. Wrong number, I thought. At exactly midnight someone entered the lobby. I never heard a car. Never heard footsteps. One moment the room was empty. The next moment a man stood in front of the desk. He looked about 50. Tall. Wearing a dark gray suit that seemed strangely old-fashioned. His hair was perfectly combed. His face expressionless. I need a room. No problem. He reached into his pocket and placed cash on the counter. Not modern bills. Old bills. The kind I'd only seen in history books. I frowned. I'm sorry, sir. He interrupted. Room 8. Every muscle in my body tightened. Rule 1. Never rent room 8 after midnight. I looked toward the key cabinet. Room 8's key hung exactly where it should. I'm sorry, I said carefully. It's under renovation. The man's eyes never blinked. I've stayed there before. I'm afraid it's unavailable. I'll wait. For how long? Until it's ready. It won't be tonight. Silence. The air felt strangely heavy. He leaned slightly closer. You don't understand. I always stay in room 8. For some reason my hands had started shaking. I'm sorry. He stared at me for several long seconds. Then he slowly collected the old bills. Without another word he turned around and walked out the front door. I immediately looked toward the parking lot. Empty. No car. No headlights. Nothing. I rushed outside. Cold wind hit my face. The road stretched into darkness. There wasn't a single person anywhere. It was impossible. He couldn't have disappeared that quickly. I searched the parking lot for nearly a minute before returning inside. Maybe he'd walked around the building. Maybe I'd imagined. The security monitor caught my attention. The camera facing the lobby replayed live footage. Only, according to the recording, the front door had never opened. I watched myself standing behind the desk. Talking. Answering someone. But there was no man. No customer. Nothing. To the camera. I had been speaking to empty air. A cold chill ran down my spine. For the first time that night, I unfolded Walter's list of rules. And I read every single line again. That I read the rules 3 times before I finally folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. The lobby suddenly felt much quieter than it had only minutes earlier. The old wall clock ticked so loudly that each second seemed to echo through the empty room. I kept replaying the security footage in my mind. I knew what I had seen. The man had stood right in front of me. He had spoken. He had placed money on the counter. But according to the camera, I had been talking to no one. I tried convincing myself there had to be a technical problem. Maybe the security system was old. Maybe the recording had glitched. That explanation lasted exactly 13 minutes. At 2:13 a.m., every monitor except one suddenly froze. The hallway camera. Rule 3. If the hallway camera freezes between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m., do not attempt to fix it. The timestamp on the screen stopped moving. 2 hours 13 minutes and 4 seconds. Everything else continued working normally. The parking lot. The office. The entrance. Only the hallway leading to rooms 7 through 11 had frozen. I stared at the monitor, remembering Walter's warning. Never leave the office during those 4 minutes. I don't know why, but something deep inside me wanted to look. It was an almost irresistible feeling. Like someone whispering directly into my thoughts. Go check. It's probably nothing. Just one quick look. I actually stood up. My hand reached for the office door. Then I remembered what Walter had said. I've buried 2 employees. I sat back down. 3 minutes felt like 30. The office had become unnaturally cold. Not chilly. Cold enough that I could see my breath. Then, footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the hallway. 1 step. Then another. Then another. Whoever it was wasn't running. They were walking toward the office. I looked at the hallway entrance. Nobody. The footsteps continued anyway. Closer. Closer. They stopped right outside the office door. Silence. Then, 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 I couldn't breathe. The doorknob turned slightly. Once. Twice. Then stopped. I stared without moving. Another minute passed. The clock changed to 2:17 a.m. Immediately, the hallway camera came back to life. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Not a single person. The footsteps had vanished. I didn't move for several minutes. Eventually, I convinced myself to check the guest register. 3 occupied rooms. Room 2. Room 4. Room 15. Nobody else. At 2:48 a.m., the office phone rang. Exactly. 3 rings. Then silence. My heart nearly stopped. Rule 5. If the telephone rings exactly 3 times and stops, unplug it until sunrise. Without hesitation, I reached behind the desk and pulled the phone cable from the wall. The silence returned immediately. For a moment, I actually smiled. Maybe the rules worked. Maybe Walter had simply experienced enough strange things that he created routines to stay calm. Then someone knocked on the office window. 3 soft taps. Tap. 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 I froze. Rule 6. If you hear someone knocking on the office window after 3 a.m., do not look outside. I checked the clock. 3:06 a.m. The tapping continued. Slow. Patient. Almost polite. Tap. 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 Every instinct screamed at me to look. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe it was a guest. Maybe. Then a woman's voice spoke from outside. "Please." Barely above a whisper. My car broke down. Another knock. "I just need to use your phone." I closed my eyes. The phone wasn't even plugged in anymore. Silence. Then, a little girl's voice. "Mister. I'm cold." My skin crawled. There hadn't been a child anywhere near the motel. Not all evening. Then came crying. Soft. Heartbreaking. Like a little girl trying not to sob too loudly. The sound lasted almost 2 minutes. I covered my ears. I refused to look. Eventually, everything stopped. No footsteps. No crying. Nothing. At 3:41 a.m., one of the guests from room 4 rushed into the lobby. He looked terrified. His wife was crying behind him. "We're leaving." "What happened?" "The woman." "What woman?" "The one standing outside our window." "There isn't anyone outside." "There is." He pointed toward the motel rooms. "She hasn't moved for 20 minutes." I looked toward the security monitor covering room 4. Empty. No woman. Nothing. The man stared at the monitor. His face turned pale. "No. She was there." His wife whispered. She was smiling. They grabbed their luggage and drove away so fast their tires sprayed gravel across the parking lot. Now only one guest remained. The man in room 2. At 4:12 a.m., every light in the motel flickered. Once. Twice. Then the lights inside room 11 came on. I felt my stomach drop. Rule 7. If room 11's lights turn on by themselves, leave immediately. Do not collect your belongings. Do not return before daylight. Room 11 wasn't occupied. It hadn't been rented in months. I stared at the monitor. The curtains slowly moved. As though someone inside had pulled them aside. A figure appeared behind the window. Too tall. Far too tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. It didn't move. It simply stood there. Watching The Office. Then. It smiled. Even through the grainy security camera. I could see impossibly white teeth. My body reacted before my brain did. I grabbed my car keys. Not my backpack. Not my wallet. Nothing else. I ran. The office door slammed behind me. Halfway across the parking lot. Something whispered directly beside my ear. "You forgot to check me in." I spun around. Nobody. I jumped into my car. The engine wouldn't start. Again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Then. The headlights inside the motel turned on one by one. Room 1. Room 2. Room 3. Room 4. Every room. Every window. As if every guest had switched on their lights simultaneously. But I knew most of those rooms were empty. Curtains slowly opened. Faces appeared. Dozens of them. Men. Women. Children. All standing perfectly still. Watching me. Every single face smiled. Not one blinked. The engine finally started. I slammed the accelerator. As I drove toward the exit, I looked once in the rearview mirror. The impossibly tall figure from room 11 was standing in the middle of the parking lot. It didn't chase me. It simply watched. Its smile never changed. I reached the nearest gas station shortly after sunrise. The clerk asked why my clothes were covered in sweat. I couldn't answer. Around 9 that morning, Walter called. I figured you'd make it. You knew. I hoped you would follow the rules. What is that place? There was a long silence. Finally he said. I stopped asking that question years ago. I quit immediately. Walter didn't try to convince me to stay. He simply wished me luck. 3 months later, I searched online for information about Blackwood Motel. I couldn't find a website. No business listing. Nothing. Only one newspaper article from 1979. It described a fire that had destroyed the original Blackwood Motel. According to the article, 8 guests had died. Every body was recovered. Except one. The night clerk. His name was Daniel Carter. He was 26 years old. The same age I had been. I stared at the old black and white photograph printed beside the article. The image was faded. Blurry. But I could still recognize the face. It was the man who had asked me for room 8. 2 years passed before curiosity got the better of me. One Saturday afternoon, I drove back. The road was exactly as I remembered. The forest. The silence. The faded sign. Except, the motel was gone. Only cracked concrete foundations remained. Trees had grown where the rooms once stood. Nature had swallowed everything. There was no lobby. No parking lot. No room 11. Just ruins. An elderly man walking his dog noticed me staring. You looking for the motel? Yeah. He nodded slowly. Burned down almost 40 years ago. I worked there. He frowned. No, son. He pointed toward the empty clearing. There hasn't been a motel here since 1979. Before I could reply, he continued walking. I stood there for another minute, unable to speak. As I returned to my car, something caught my eye. Lying in the dirt near the old foundation was a rusted motel key. A faded brass tag still hung from it. Stamped into the metal were 2 words. Room 8. I never picked it up. Some things are better left exactly where they belong. When people hear the word farm, they imagine peaceful mornings, fresh air, and endless green fields. I used to think the same thing. Until I spent one summer on my grandfather's property in northern Pennsylvania. There are places in this world that feel wrong. Not haunted. Not cursed. Just wrong. As if the land itself wants you to leave. My grandfather's farm was one of those places. I've never told this story publicly before. Not because I'm afraid people won't believe me. But because I still wake up some nights hearing that sound beneath the floor. The scratching. Slow. Patient. As if something is still trying to dig its way out. It happened in the summer of 2014. I was 23 and had just finished college. Jobs were scarce, and I needed somewhere cheap to stay while figuring out what to do with my life. My grandfather, Henry Lawson, owned nearly 300 acres of farmland about 2 hours from the nearest city. Most of the land wasn't even used anymore. He had sold off most of his livestock years earlier after my grandmother passed away. Now it was just him. A weathered farmhouse. An old red barn. A few chickens. And miles of silence. He called me one evening. If you're still looking for a place, you can stay here for the summer. I accepted immediately. The drive there took almost 5 hours. The farther I traveled, the fewer houses I saw. Eventually, the paved road became gravel. Cell service disappeared. Radio stations faded into static. By the time I reached the property, the sun was setting behind endless fields of corn. The farmhouse looked exactly as I remembered from childhood. White paint peeling from the walls. A wide wooden porch. A rusted windmill turning lazily in the evening breeze. Grandpa stood outside waiting. Even at 78, he was surprisingly strong. He hugged me without saying much. That was just how he was. Few words. Hard worker. The kind of man whose hands looked like they'd been carved from old oak. Dinner was quiet. We ate fried chicken, potatoes, and fresh vegetables from the garden. Afterward, he showed me my room upstairs. Same old bed. Same old dresser. Same faded wallpaper with tiny blue flowers. It felt comforting. Until he stopped at my bedroom door. "If you hear noises tonight." He paused. "Don't go outside." I laughed. "Coyotes?" He looked toward the window. "No." "What then?" He didn't answer. Instead, he simply said, "Good night." The first night was uneventful. Mostly. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a strange vibration. Not loud. Just enough to shake the glass of water beside my bed. At first I thought it was thunder. Then I realized something. The vibration came in pulses. Every few seconds. Like. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. Thump. The sound seemed to come from underground. It continued for almost 10 minutes before stopping. The next morning I mentioned it over breakfast. Grandpa didn't even look up from his coffee. "I told you not to worry about noises." "What was it?" "Ground settles. The ground doesn't thump." He finally looked at me. "Out here. It does." Over the next week, I settled into a routine. Wake up before sunrise. Help repair fences. Feed the chickens. Clear weeds. Simple work. Honest work. Yet something always felt slightly off. The animals behaved strangely. The chickens refused to go near the western edge of the property. The farm dog, Rusty, would bark endlessly at one particular section of the cornfield every evening. Even the horses in the neighboring farm seemed nervous whenever they passed that direction. One afternoon I asked Grandpa about it. "What's over there?" He didn't even turn around. "Nothing. There has to be something. Just old land." Later that evening, I walked toward the western field anyway. About halfway there, I noticed dozens of dead birds scattered across the ground. None appeared injured. No blood. No broken bones. Just dead. Lying in the grass as though they'd fallen from the sky. A foul smell lingered in the air. The farther I walked, the quieter everything became. No insects. No birds. No wind. It was as if every living creature avoided that part of the farm. Then I found it. A large circular patch of earth where nothing grew. No grass. No weeds. Nothing. The soil was dark gray instead of brown. About 30 feet across. Perfectly round. As though something enormous had once rested there. I stepped closer. The ground felt strangely warm. Not hot. Just warmer than the surrounding soil. Almost alive. Suddenly Rusty began barking furiously behind me. I turned. The old dog stood nearly 50 yards away. He refused to come closer. Instead, he growled. Not at me. At the ground beneath my feet. A second later. I felt it. Something moved below the soil. Not an earthquake. Not shifting dirt. Something large. Moving slowly beneath the surface. The earth rose slightly. Only an inch or two. Like a wave passing under a blanket. It traveled from one side of the clearing to the other. My heart stopped. I backed away as fast as I could. Rusty immediately ran toward me. The moment I left the circle, he stopped barking. Neither of us looked back until we reached the farmhouse. That night I told Grandpa everything. He became unusually quiet. Finally he stood up. Without saying a word, he walked into the hallway and returned carrying an old leather journal. The cover was cracked with age. Inside were handwritten entries dating back over 80 years. He opened to a page marked 1956. Read. The handwriting belonged to my great-grandfather. It described livestock disappearing. Cows refusing to enter the western field. Dogs barking into empty ground. Then one sentence caught my attention. Whatever lives beneath the hill comes closer every year. I looked up. What does that mean? Grandpa sighed deeply. My father wrote that. You believe him? I buried enough animals to know he wasn't lying. What lives under the farm? I don't know. Have you ever seen it? No. Then how do you know it's real? He looked directly into my eyes. Because every 17 years, someone disappears. The room became silent. I waited for him to smile. He didn't. My older brother vanished in 1973. He turned another page. My cousin disappeared in 1990. Another page. There was a hired farmhand in 2007. My stomach tightened. Police. They searched for weeks. They found nothing. He slowly shook his head. Only footprints. Leading where? Into the western field. And then they stopped. No signs of a struggle. No blood. Nothing. Just footprints ending in the middle of empty ground. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 1:40 a.m., Rusty started growling downstairs. Not barking. Growling. Low. Continuous. I looked out my bedroom window toward the barn. Moonlight covered the fields in silver. At first everything appeared normal. Then I noticed movement. Someone was walking through the corn. Very slowly. Toward the farmhouse. I assumed it was Grandpa. Until the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was far too tall. At least 7 feet. Its arms hung unnaturally low. Its movements were stiff. Jerky. As though it had never learned how to walk properly. It reached the edge of the yard. Then stopped. It wasn't looking at the house. It was looking at my bedroom window. I couldn't see its face. Only its outline. Completely motionless. Rusty began whining. Not barking anymore. Whining. Like he wanted to hide. I reached for my phone to call Grandpa. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The yard was empty. The corn wasn't moving. There were no footprints. Nothing. The next morning, I searched the yard anyway. Near the porch, I found something buried in the mud. A footprint. If you could even call it that. It looked almost human. Except, it had only 3 long toes. And whatever had made it, had been standing directly beneath my bedroom window that I stood frozen, staring at the footprint. 3 long toes. Each one ended in a sharp point, as if whatever had stepped there had claws instead of nails. It was at least twice the size of my own foot. I called Grandpa outside. He looked at the print for only a second before covering it with a shovel full of dirt. "Don't show this to anyone," he said. "What made it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the western field. "The cycle's starting early." "What cycle?" He sighed. "I was hoping you wouldn't have to know." For the rest of the morning, Grandpa hardly spoke. After lunch, he finally motioned for me to follow him to the old barn. The barn was older than the farmhouse itself. Most of it was used for storage now, broken tools, rusted machinery, and stacks of hay that hadn't been touched in years. He walked to the back wall and pulled away a pile of wooden crates. Behind them was a heavy iron trapdoor set into the floor. I'd played in this barn as a kid dozens of times. I'd never noticed it. Grandpa unlocked a thick chain wrapped around the handle. I haven't opened this in 10 years. The hinges groaned as he lifted the door. A cold draft rushed out. Stone steps disappeared into darkness. What is this? Storm cellar. But that's not what it was built for. He picked up an old lantern and handed me another. Come on. The cellar smelled of damp earth and old wood. The walls were made of rough stone, but they looked repaired, as though someone had reinforced them many times over the years. We reached the bottom. The room wasn't large. Shelves lined one wall, filled with dusty jars and faded notebooks. On the opposite wall were deep scratches. Hundreds of them. Long grooves cut into solid stone. I ran my fingers over one. There too. Deep to be made by tools. Grandpa nodded. They weren't. He pointed toward the far corner. A narrow tunnel disappeared into the darkness beneath the farm. It wasn't man-made. Its walls were smooth, almost polished. Like something enormous had carved it over many years. How far does it go? We don't know. You've never explored it. My father tried. What happened? He came back. Grandpa paused. But he was never the same. According to Grandpa, my great-grandfather had entered the tunnel in 1956 after several cows disappeared. He was gone for almost 6 hours. When he returned, he refused to explain what he'd seen. For the rest of his life, he kept every window in the farmhouse covered after sunset. He stopped farming the western field completely. And every night before bed, he would walk outside with a lantern and quietly say the same words. We're still here. Leave us in peace. No one knew why. No one asked. That evening, rain clouds rolled across the sky. By sunset, a violent thunderstorm had settled over the farm. The power went out just after 8. We lit oil lamps and sat quietly in the kitchen. Neither of us said much. Then, thump. The glass on the table vibrated. 3 seconds later. Thump. The sound came from beneath the house. Exactly like the first night. Only louder. Rusty crawled under the table and refused to come out. Grandpa stood. It's closer. What is? He looked toward the floor. It. Around midnight, the storm finally passed. The silence that followed felt almost unnatural. Then we heard it. A scratching sound. Slow. Steady. Coming from directly beneath the kitchen floor. Scratch. 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 It circled beneath us. Moving around the house. Never stopping. I grabbed a flashlight. I'm calling the sheriff. Grandpa grabbed my wrist. No. Why not? They can't stop it. The scratching suddenly stopped. For several seconds. Nothing. Then something struck the underside of the floor. Boom. The entire kitchen shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Another impact. Boom. This one was stronger. A cabinet door swung open. Plates crashed onto the floor. Then, silence again. Grandpa whispered. It's listening. At 2 a.m., Rusty ran to the front door, barking wildly. Not toward the western field. Toward the barn. We stepped onto the porch. The moon had emerged from behind the clouds. Everything looked silver. Quiet. Then I noticed movement near the barn. A figure. Standing perfectly still. 7 feet tall. Its skin looked pale gray in the moonlight. Its arms reached almost to its knees. It had no visible ears. No hair. Just a long, narrow head tilted slightly to one side. Watching us. My mouth went dry. Grandpa didn't seem surprised. He simply whispered, "Don't run." The creature took one slow step forward. Then another. It moved awkwardly, like its joints bent the wrong way. Rusty charged toward it. "Rusty, no." The dog disappeared into the darkness between the barn and the cornfield. A loud yelp echoed across the farm. Then, nothing. No barking. No growling. Only silence. Grandpa closed his eyes. "We've lost him." The creature was gone by morning. We searched for Rusty. All we found was his collar. It lay beside the circular patch of dead earth. The leather strap had been snapped clean in half. There were no tracks. No blood. Nothing else. Grandpa buried the collar beneath an old oak tree. He didn't say a word during the entire walk back. That afternoon, I made a decision. I couldn't leave without knowing the truth. While Grandpa slept in his chair, I returned to the barn alone. Lantern in one hand. Flashlight in the other. I climbed into the tunnel. The air became colder with every step. The passage sloped gently downward. After about 15 minutes, I reached a large underground chamber. My flashlight swept across the walls. Bones. Hundreds. Of them. Animal bones. Cow skulls. Deer antlers. Bird skeletons. And human bones. Some were old. Others looked disturbingly recent. In the center of the chamber stood a mound of earth. It rose and fell. Slowly. Like something beneath it was breathing. I couldn't move. The mound shifted again. Then, a single gray hand emerged from the soil. Long fingers. 3 claws. Exactly like the footprint. The hand gripped the ground. Another hand appeared. Then a head. The creature slowly pulled itself upward. Its eyes opened. They weren't black. They weren't red. They were completely white. It looked directly at me. Not with anger. With curiosity. As if it had been expecting me. I turned and ran. I don't remember climbing out of the tunnel. I only remember Grandpa dragging me out of the barn. "You went down there." I couldn't speak. He looked at my face and understood. "You saw it." I nodded. He quietly locked the trapdoor. Then he wrapped the chain around it 3 times. I left the farm before sunset. Grandpa hugged me goodbye. "You'll never come back." It wasn't a question. "No." He nodded. "Good." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. 3 months later, he died peacefully in his sleep. The farm was sold. The new owners demolished the old barn and built a larger one. According to the local newspaper, construction stopped after workers uncovered a network of underground tunnels. Officials claimed they were made by erosion. The project resumed 2 weeks later. Last year, I searched online out of curiosity. The farm is abandoned again. No one has lived there for long. Every family leaves within a few months. The listings always describe the same problem. Strange vibrations beneath the house. Livestock disappearing. Dogs refusing to enter the western field. One review caught my attention more than any other. It was posted only 6 months ago. The owner wrote, "Every night around 2 a.m. something scratches beneath the floor. Yesterday, my son asked who the tall man standing outside his bedroom window was." The review was deleted the next day. I haven't stopped thinking about it since. Sometimes, late at night, I wake to a faint vibration beneath my apartment floor. It only lasts a few seconds. Just enough to rattle the glass on my bedside table. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. I tell myself it's old plumbing. Or the building settling. But every time I hear it, I remember the white eyes opening beneath the farm. And I wonder if whatever lived under my grandfather's land ever really stayed there. If someone told you they had met a person who couldn't be seen in a mirror, you would probably assume they were lying. Or losing their mind. That's exactly what I believed. Until I rented apartment 407. I've spent years trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. A trick of light. A damaged mirror. Stress. Lack of sleep. Anything. But no matter how many excuses I came up with, one fact never changed. Every photograph showed her. Every security camera recorded her. Every person in the building remembered speaking to her. But whenever she stood in front of a mirror, there was nothing there. My name is Emily Carter, and this happened in the fall of 2021. I had just accepted a new job as a graphic designer in Chicago. The company paid well, but I had less than 2 weeks to find an apartment before my first day. Housing was expensive. Most places were either far beyond my budget or already rented. Then I found an online listing. Ashcroft Apartments. Apartment 407. The rent was almost 30% cheaper than every other apartment in the neighborhood. I called immediately. The property manager, a man named Victor Hale, sounded eager. If you're free today, you can move in tomorrow. It felt almost too easy. Looking back, that should have been enough to make me walk away. Ashcroft Apartments was an old 12-story brick building built sometime in the 1950s. From the outside it looked ordinary. Clean lobby. Fresh paint. Small flower beds near the entrance. Nothing unusual. Victor met me in the lobby. He was in his 60s with silver hair and an unusually tired expression. He showed me the apartment. It wasn't large. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. A small kitchen. Hardwood floors. Everything seemed well maintained. The only thing that stood out was the number of mirrors. There was one in the hallway. One above the fireplace. A large one in the bedroom. Even the kitchen had decorative mirrored tiles along one wall. I laughed. Whoever lived here before must have loved mirrors. Victor didn't laugh. They weren't theirs. What do you mean? They've always been here. I assumed he meant the mirrors were part of the building. I signed the lease. The first week passed quietly. My new job kept me busy. Most evenings I came home exhausted, cooked dinner, watched television, and went to bed. The building itself was peaceful. The neighbors were polite. One woman in particular always caught my attention. She looked to be in her early 30s. Dark hair. Pale skin. Simple gray coat. She always smiled politely whenever we crossed paths. I saw her almost every day. In the hallway. The elevator. The laundry room. Yet something about her felt different. Not frightening. Just detached. Like someone pretending to be human. One evening we ended up sharing the elevator. She smiled. You're new. Yeah. Apartment 407. I know. Something about her answer made me uncomfortable. I've seen you unpacking. Oh. I'm Claire. I'm Emily. It was nice meeting you. She nodded. Then, just before the elevator doors opened, she quietly said, "Don't remove the mirrors." Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. A few days later, I mentioned Claire to another tenant. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson. She looked confused. Claire. The woman with dark hair. Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. Oh. You've met her. Everyone has. Which apartment does she live in? Mrs. Patterson frowned. I don't think anyone knows. That answer stayed with me. How could no one know where she lived? The building only had 12 floors. Surely someone had seen her enter an apartment. One Saturday afternoon I decided to rearrange my furniture. While moving the hallway mirror, I discovered something written on the wall behind it. The words had been scratched directly into the plaster. Do not let her see herself. My stomach tightened. I called Victor downstairs. He looked at the writing for only a second. Without speaking, he covered it with fresh paint. What does it mean? Probably an old tenant trying to scare people. Who wrote it? No idea. He avoided my eyes. That night, around 11:30 p.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, Claire stood there. She smiled exactly as she always did. I'm sorry to bother you. No problem. My bathroom mirror broke. I was wondering if I could borrow yours for just a few minutes. Something inside me immediately remembered the words behind the hallway mirror. Do not let her see herself. I almost laughed at myself. It was ridiculous. She simply needed a mirror. Still, I hesitated. Claire noticed. It's okay. I understand. She smiled again. But if you change your mind. She handed me a small folded note. Read this first. Then she walked away. Inside the note was a single sentence. Have you noticed that none of the mirrors in this building ever reflect the hallway after midnight? I checked the clock. 11:47 p.m. Curiosity got the better of me. At exactly midnight, I stood in front of the large hallway mirror. The apartment behind me reflected perfectly. The living room. The kitchen. The lights. Everything. Then I slowly opened my front door. The hallway outside was brightly lit. I could see it with my own eyes. But inside the mirror, the open doorway reflected only darkness. Not a shadow. Not poor lighting. Absolute blackness. As though nothing existed beyond my apartment. I stepped into the hallway. The mirror still showed darkness where the corridor should have been. Then, a figure slowly appeared inside the mirror. A woman. Standing behind me. Long dark hair. Gray coat. Claire. I spun around immediately. The hallway was empty. Nobody. I looked back at the mirror. Claire was still standing there. Only now. She was smiling. Much wider than before. Not naturally. Her smile stretched impossibly across her face. Then, very slowly, she raised one hand and pointed directly toward apartment 412. The reflection vanished. The hallway appeared normal again. I stood there for several seconds, unable to move. Finally, I looked down the corridor. Apartment 412 was only 4 doors away. Its door stood slightly open. And from somewhere inside, I heard someone whisper. Emily, the whisper came again. Emily. It was soft. Almost gentle. Like someone trying not to wake the neighbors. I looked down the hallway. Apartment 412's door was open just a few inches. A warm yellow light spilled onto the carpet. My first thought was that someone inside needed help. My second thought was that I should go back into my apartment and lock the door. Instead, I walked toward 412. Every step felt heavier than the last. The hallway was completely silent. No televisions. No footsteps. No elevators moving. Only the sound of my own breathing. When I reached the apartment, I knocked softly. No answer. The door slowly creaked open by itself. Hello. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The apartment looked exactly like mine. Same layout. Same furniture. Same mirrors. But something was wrong. Every mirror in the apartment had been covered with white sheets. Every single one. I stepped inside. The air smelled old. Like dust and damp paper. There were dishes in the sink covered with mold. A calendar still hung on the kitchen wall. The last date marked was October 14, 2017. 4 years earlier. It looked as if someone had simply walked away in the middle of their life. Then I heard another whisper. From the bedroom, Emily. I slowly followed the sound. The bedroom door was half open. Inside stood an elderly man. Thin. Gray hair. Wearing pajamas. He looked startled to see me. Who are you? He asked. I heard someone call. My name. He stared at me for a moment. Then his face turned pale. You saw her. My heart skipped. Claire. He nodded slowly. You need to leave. What is this place? You shouldn't have come in. He grabbed my arm. His hands were shaking. Whatever happens, don't uncover the mirrors. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then every bulb in the apartment went out. The room fell into darkness. Only my phone flashlight remained. Something moved in the hallway. Not footsteps. A shadow. Sliding silently across the floor. The old man whispered. She's here. I pointed my flashlight toward the bedroom door. Nothing. Then. A loud tearing sound echoed through the apartment. The sheet covering the bedroom mirror slowly slipped to the floor. Neither of us had touched it. The mirror was now completely uncovered. I looked at it instinctively. The bedroom reflected perfectly. The bed. The dresser. The window. Me. The old man. Everything. Except the doorway. Where the hallway should have been. There was only darkness. A shape slowly emerged from it. Claire. She stepped out of the darkness inside the mirror. She smiled at us. Then she placed one finger against her lips. As if asking us to stay quiet. I turned toward the real doorway. It was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, Claire had disappeared. The old man pulled me into the living room. We have to cover it again. We grabbed the fallen sheet. As we reached the bedroom, the mirror cracked. A single thin line appeared across the glass. Then another. And another. The cracks spread like spiderwebs. Without warning, the mirror exploded. Glass shattered across the room. Every light in the apartment came back on. Silence. Claire was gone. The hallway reflected normally again. The old man collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily. It's getting stronger. What is? He looked at the broken glass. The thing pretending to be Claire. He introduced himself as Arthur. He had lived in apartment 412 for nearly 20 years. His wife, Margaret, had disappeared 5 years earlier. Police thought she ran away. He shook his head. They never believed me. What happened? Arthur pointed toward one of the broken mirror pieces lying on the floor. She saw someone standing behind her. In the mirror. He nodded. But when she turned around, there was nobody there. He swallowed hard. The next morning, she wasn't in the apartment. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No note. Only one thing. What? He looked directly at me. Every mirror in the apartment showed her reflection. But she was gone. The next morning, I confronted Victor. At first he denied knowing anything. Then I mentioned Arthur. His shoulders slumped. He locked the office door. There have been 11 disappearances. My blood ran cold. Since when? 1958. Always this building. Always the mirrors. He opened an old filing cabinet. Inside were newspaper clippings. Missing persons. Different names. Different decades. But every article had one thing in common. The victims all lived in Ashcroft apartments. Most of them had lived on the 4th floor, including apartment 407. That evening, I packed my belongings. I didn't care about breaking my lease. I just wanted out. Around 8 p.m., someone knocked. It was Claire. Exactly as calm as ever. I heard you're leaving. I am. She smiled. That's disappointing. Who are you? Instead of answering, she asked, have you looked in a mirror today? I frowned. What? You should. Then she walked away. After she left, I hurried into the bathroom. I looked into the mirror. My reflection stared back. Normal. Then, someone slowly appeared behind me. Claire. Standing less than a foot away. I spun around. Nobody. I looked back. She was still in the mirror. Only this time, she wasn't smiling. She looked frightened. She mouthed 3 words. It's not me. Before I could react, another face appeared beside hers. Its skin was gray. Its eyes completely black. Its mouth opened far wider than any human mouth could. Claire's reflection was dragged backward into the darkness. She disappeared. The creature turned toward me. Then the bathroom mirror shattered. I ran. I didn't stop to collect the rest of my things. I ran down 4 flights of stairs. Past the lobby. Into the street. I never looked back. Police later searched my apartment. They blamed the broken mirror on stress. Victor retired the following month. Ashcroft Apartments remained open. Business continued as usual. Arthur died a year later. According to the obituary, he passed away peacefully in his sleep. His apartment was rented again 2 weeks later. Last winter, I returned to Chicago for a conference. Curiosity got the better of me. Ashcroft Apartments was still standing. The lobby looked freshly renovated. A young receptionist smiled. Can I help you? I used to live here. Oh. Apartment 407. She smiled politely. That's occupied. By whom? She checked her computer. A woman named Claire. The room suddenly felt cold. I didn't ask another question. I left immediately. Even now, I avoid mirrors after midnight. Not because I'm afraid of seeing my own reflection, but because sometimes, just for a fraction of a second, I see someone standing behind me. A woman in a gray coat. She never smiles anymore. She only stares at me with terrified eyes. As if she's trying to warn me that something is still trapped inside the glass. And every time I turn around, there's no one there. If you've ever hiked through a national forest, you've probably seen the signs. Stay on marked trails. Do not hike after dark. Report unusual wildlife behavior. Most people think those warnings are about bears or getting lost. They aren't. At least, not in Hollow Pine Forest. I worked there for 6 years as a park ranger. During that time, dozens of people went missing. Officially, they were listed as accidents. Unprepared hikers. Bad weather. Wild animals. Those explanations made the newspapers. They never told the public what we actually found. Because some discoveries don't belong in reports. They belong buried. This is the story of Ranger Michael Reeves. The best ranger our station ever had. The man who disappeared. Without leaving a single footprint. I joined the Hollow Pine Ranger Station in the spring of 2017. The forest covered nearly 200,000 acres of mountains, rivers, and old-growth pine. It was breathtaking. Peaceful. Beautiful. During the day. At night. Everything changed. The forest became unnaturally quiet. No birds. No insects. Even the wind seemed to disappear. The older rangers noticed it. The new ones usually laughed. Until their first night patrol. Michael Reeves trained me during my first month. He was 38. Calm. Experienced. The kind of man who never raised his voice. He knew every trail, every creek, and almost every tree by memory. If Michael told you something wasn't safe, you listened. On my second day, Michael handed me a small notebook. It wasn't an official park guide. The cover simply read, Night Patrol Notes. Inside were handwritten rules. Some were normal. Always carry 2 flashlights. Keep the radio charged. Then the list became strange. If you hear someone calling your name after sunset, do not answer. Never whistle in the forest after dark. If you find fresh footprints with no return tracks, leave immediately. If the trees become completely silent, stop walking. Do not follow lights between midnight and 4 a.m. I looked at him. Is this a joke? Michael smiled faintly. I thought the same thing. And now? I never patrol without it. Most nights were ordinary. Checking campsites. Helping lost hikers. Watching for illegal campfires. Then. There were the other nights. The ones nobody talked about. One evening, dispatch radioed us about a missing backpacker. A 20-year-old college student named Aaron Blake. His friends reported that he'd walked away from camp around sunset and never returned. We found his backpack less than an hour later. Still zipped. Phone inside. Wallet inside. Food untouched. No signs of a struggle. Only footprints. They led into the trees. Michael stopped. Something about his expression changed. What? He pointed toward the ground. Count them. I counted. 34 footprints. Then. Nothing. The tracks ended in the middle of soft mud. There were no return prints. No animal tracks. No drag marks. Nothing. It looked as though Aaron had simply vanished into thin air. Search teams spent 3 days looking for him. Helicopters. Dogs. Drones. Nothing. The official report blamed unstable ground. Michael threw the report into the trash. A month later, we were repairing trail markers near Raven Creek. That's when I first noticed the stone markers. Small piles of rocks. Perfectly stacked. About waist high. There were dozens of them hidden among the trees. They're not on the map. They're not supposed to be. Who built them? Michael stared into the woods. No one knows. Every stack pointed in the same direction. Toward the deepest part of Hollow Pine. An area closed to the public for over 40 years. Why's it closed? Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked. You believe every missing person is ever found? No. What if I told you this forest returns most of them? I frowned. What do you mean? They come back. I laughed. That's a good thing. Michael looked at me. No. They're never the same. He told me about a rescue from 2009. A woman disappeared while hiking alone. Search teams spent 9 days looking for her. Then one morning, she walked out of the forest by herself. Barefoot. No injuries. No dehydration. No explanation. She couldn't remember where she'd been. Or how she'd survived. Doctors examined her. Perfectly healthy. Except for one detail. She no longer recognized mirrors. Whenever shown her own reflection, she insisted she was looking at a stranger. I assumed Michael was exaggerating. Until September. That's when everything changed. It started with a radio call. 2 teenagers had ignored the trail closures and entered the restricted northern section. We reached the area just before sunset. The boys were easy to find. Both were sitting beside the trail. Neither was injured. Neither would speak. They simply stared into the trees. After nearly 10 minutes, one finally whispered, "There's someone watching." We searched the area. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No campsites. Just trees. As we escorted them back, the younger boy suddenly pointed uphill. There. I looked. At first. Nothing. Then I saw it. A person standing between 2 pine trees. Far away. Too far to identify. Completely still. Watching us. I raised my binoculars. The clearing was empty. The figure had vanished. That night, Michael broke one of his own rules. We were driving back to the ranger station when we heard someone whistling in the forest. A slow, 3-note tune. It echoed through the trees. Michael immediately stopped the truck. "What are you doing?" "Listening. You wrote never whistle." "I know." The whistling came again. Closer. Then a voice. "Help. A man. Somewhere beyond the trees." Michael grabbed his flashlight. "I'm going." I grabbed his arm. "Dispatch can send more people." He shook his head. "If someone's hurt, we don't have time." He disappeared into the darkness before I could stop him. I waited beside the truck. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The radio crackled. Michael's voice came through. Barely audible. "I found." Static swallowed the sentence. "Michael?" "Nothing." "Michael, respond." Silence. Then. One final transmission. It wasn't Michael's voice anymore. It sounded exactly like him. But there was no emotion. Only a flat, empty tone. It said, "Don't come looking for me." The radio went dead. I waited until sunrise with 3 other rangers. Michael never came back. The search began at first light. The first thing we found was his flashlight. Still switched on. Lying perfectly upright in the middle of the trail. As if someone had carefully placed it there. Next to it were only 12 footprints. They led into the trees. And just like Aaron Blake's, they ended. Without a single return track. Michael's flashlight was still glowing when I picked it up. The batteries should have died hours earlier. Instead, the beam was as bright as if it had just been switched on. Around it, the forest was silent. Not the normal silence of early morning. This was different. No birds. No insects. Even the pine branches above us hung perfectly still. It was as though the entire forest was holding its breath. One of the senior rangers, Tom Willis, looked around nervously. "We shouldn't be here." The search leader frowned. "We have a missing ranger." Tom didn't argue. He simply looked at the footprints. 12. He counted them again. 12 exactly. Nobody said anything. Then he quietly whispered, "We're already too late." The footprints belonged to Michael. His boot tread matched perfectly. They led off the trail into a dense stand of pine trees. After the 12th print, nothing. The ground beyond was soft from recent rain. There should have been more tracks. There weren't. Search dogs refused to continue. Each dog reached the 12th footprint, then stopped. Some whimpered. One lay down and refused to move. Another pulled so hard on its leash that its harness snapped. I'd never seen trained search dogs behave like that. For the next 5 days, over 100 people searched Hollow Pine. State police, volunteers, helicopters, drones equipped with thermal cameras. Nothing. It was as if Michael had dissolved into the forest. Officially, the case was suspended after 3 weeks. The report listed his disappearance as a probable hiking accident. None of us believed it. Especially Tom. About a month later, Tom asked me to meet him after work. He unlocked an old storage room beneath the ranger station. I'd worked there for nearly a year. I never knew the room existed. Inside were metal filing cabinets covered in dust. Tom opened one drawer. Every file inside had a red label. Missing. Some dated back to the 1960s. There were dozens. Maybe hundreds. These aren't public. I picked up the oldest file. A ranger named Samuel Dixon. Missing in 1964. Last seen during a night patrol. Another. Karen Hughes. Camper. Missing in 1978. Another. Deputy Ranger Lisa Monroe. Every file contained almost the same sentence. Last known footprints ended abruptly without signs of struggle. I looked at Tom. "How many?" He sighed. "More than anyone admits." Then he showed me something that made my blood run cold. A faded black and white photograph. Taken in 1982. It showed 5 rangers standing in front of the station. One of them looked exactly like Michael. Same face. Same smile. Same scar above his left eyebrow. This can't be him. It isn't. Who is it? His father. I stared at the photo. Tom nodded slowly. Thomas Reeves. He disappeared in this forest 39 years before Michael. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Father and son. Both vanished. Both without leaving a trace. Coincidence suddenly felt impossible. Winter arrived. Snow covered Hollow Pine. Searches ended. Visitors stayed away. The forest became almost empty. One evening, I volunteered for a routine patrol. Mostly because I couldn't stand sitting behind a desk anymore. Tom insisted on coming with me. By sunset, heavy snow had begun falling. Visibility dropped to less than 50 yards. We decided to turn back. Then, the radio crackled. At first, only static. Then a voice. Unit 4. Tom froze. The call sign belonged to Michael. I grabbed the microphone. Michael? Static. Then. I'm cold. The voice sounded weak. Distant. Where are you? A long pause. Then. Follow the light. The transmission ended. We looked at each other. No one else should have been using that frequency. Then we saw it. A lantern. Deep between the trees. Its yellow light swayed gently, as if someone was carrying it. Tom whispered, "Don't." I remembered Michael's notebook. "Do not follow lights between midnight and 4 a.m. I checked my watch. 12:18 a.m. The lantern moved farther into the forest. Slowly. Waiting. Almost inviting us. Every instinct told me to follow. If Michael was alive, this could be our only chance. Tom grabbed my shoulder. "That's not him." The lantern stopped. About 100 yards away. Then, a second lantern appeared. Then a third. Then dozens. Scattered between the trees. Hundreds of tiny lights. Perfectly still. Watching us. I don't know how else to describe it. It felt like the forest itself had opened its eyes. Tom slowly backed away. "We leave." We turned around. Neither of us ran. Neither of us looked back. The next morning, we returned with 6 other rangers. There were no lanterns. No footprints. Nothing. Except one object hanging from a low pine branch. Michael's ranger hat. Clean. Dry. Despite the snowstorm. Inside the hat was a folded piece of paper. It was one page torn from his notebook. Only one sentence had been written. In Michael's handwriting. "If you hear my voice again, don't answer." I resigned 6 months later. I couldn't keep pretending Hollow Pine was just another forest. It wasn't. Something lived there. Whether it was an animal, a place, or something we don't have a name for, I still don't know. 3 years passed. I tried to move on. Then one afternoon, I received an email. No subject line. No message. Only one attachment. A photograph. It showed a group of hikers standing at a scenic overlook in Hollow Pine. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed a man standing between 2 trees in the background. He wore a ranger uniform. His face was partly hidden. I zoomed in. It was Michael. He hadn't aged a day. He was looking directly at the camera. Smiling. I contacted the family who took the picture. They insisted there hadn't been anyone standing behind them. The man only appeared after they reviewed the photo at home. They assumed it was another hiker. I didn't tell them the truth. Last autumn, Hollow Pine announced a new guided hiking program. The promotional photos were posted online. Hundreds of visitors commented on how beautiful the forest looked. Most of them never noticed what I saw. Near the edge of one picture, standing between 2 pine trees, was a ranger in a green uniform, watching the hikers, smiling. The comments never mentioned him. Maybe they couldn't see him. Or maybe they simply didn't recognize his face. I did. It was Michael Reeves. Still standing in Hollow Pine Forest. Still waiting. And every now and then, when the wind is completely still, I remember the last thing he ever told me over the radio. "Don't come looking for me." I finally understand what he meant. He wasn't warning us that he was lost. He was warning us that if we found him, we might never leave the forest either. Most people think working the night shift at a 911 dispatch center is boring. Long hours. Cold coffee. The occasional emergency. I believed that too. Until the night I answered a phone call from a woman who hadn't died yet. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. At least, that's what she told me. According to our records, she called me at 2:17 a.m. on November 8, 2022. According to the police report, she wasn't supposed to be alive until 3:41 a.m. And according to the coroner, she never made that second call. I've worked emergency dispatch for almost 12 years. I've heard every kind of panic imaginable. House fires. Heart attacks. Car accidents. Home invasions. People screaming. People crying. People whispering because they were hiding from someone inside their own house. You learn very quickly how to separate fear from confusion. The voice I heard that night wasn't confused. It was absolutely terrified. The dispatch center sat in the basement of the county public safety building. No windows. Just rows of computer monitors, flashing phone lines, and the constant hum of air conditioners. On most nights, there were 6 of us working. That Tuesday, only 3 operators were on duty because 2 people had called in sick and another had gone home with the flu. It was unusually quiet. Just after midnight, I finished logging a false alarm from a convenience store when my supervisor, Linda, walked by. "If it stays this slow," she joked, "maybe we'll actually finish our paperwork." I smiled. She walked away. Those were the last normal words anyone said that night. At 2:17 a.m., line 4 lit up. I adjusted my headset. "County Emergency Dispatch." "What's your emergency?" For several seconds. Nothing. Only breathing. Fast. Shaky breathing. Then a woman whispered, "Please don't hang up. I'm here. Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah what?" "Sarah Mitchell." "What's happening?" Another long pause. Then she said something that made me stop typing. "He's inside my house." I immediately opened the emergency response screen. "Okay, Sarah. I need your address." Silence. Then, "I don't know." I frowned. "You don't know your address?" "I'm not home." "Where are you?" "I'm hiding." "From who?" "I don't know." People in shock often struggle to answer simple questions. I'd handled situations like this before. I kept my voice calm. "Sarah, listen carefully. I need you to tell me anything you can see." She took a shaky breath. "A staircase." "Okay." "Wooden." "A grandfather clock." "Blue wallpaper." I typed everything into the incident notes. "Any windows?" "Yes." "What do you see outside?" She hesitated. "Nothing." "What do you mean?" "It's too dark." Then, a loud bang echoed through the phone. Sarah gasped. "He's downstairs." I dispatched the nearest sheriff's deputies. Without an address, there wasn't much else we could do. I kept her talking. "Sarah, do you know the town you're in?" "No." "What state?" Her breathing became faster. "I don't remember." That wasn't normal. Then she asked a question that chilled me. "What year is it?" I assumed I'd misheard. "I'm sorry." "What year?" "It's 2022. The line went completely silent. When she finally spoke again, her voice had changed. Barely above a whisper. "No. No. No. Sarah. That can't be right." "What can't?" "I called too early." I stared at my monitor. "What do you mean?" "I was supposed to wait." "Wait for what?" "For him to leave." "Who?" "The man." Another crash. Closer this time. She started crying. "He's coming upstairs." Our phone system automatically records every emergency call. Everything Sarah said was being archived. At the time, I had no idea how important that recording would become. "Sarah. I need you to stay with me." "What does he look like?" "I've never seen his face." "Then how do you know it's a man?" "I hear him. Every night. Every night. Has this happened before? No. But it will. I stopped typing. What did you just say? She answered immediately. It hasn't happened yet. My heart began pounding. People in crisis sometimes say strange things. But something about her voice felt different. Not confused. Not delusional. As if she genuinely believed every word. Then she said my name. Not the name I used on dispatch calls. My real first name. Only coworkers knew it. Only family used it. She whispered. Daniel. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. I never told you my name. I know. How do you know it? She didn't answer. Instead, she asked. Is Linda still alive? I looked across the room. My supervisor sat 20 feet away reviewing paperwork. Yes. Sarah began crying harder. She won't be. Before I could respond, every computer screen in the dispatch center went black. Not one. All of them. Phones. Maps. Caller ID. Everything. The backup lights switched on automatically. Red emergency lighting filled the room. Operators around me looked up in confusion. Then every phone began ringing. At exactly the same time. Every line. Every headset. Every emergency phone. All ringing together. None of us had ever seen anything like it. Linda shouted. Don't answer anything until the system comes back. Everyone froze. Except me. Because Sarah was still on the line. Barely whispering. He's found me. Then. The call disconnected. Our systems restarted 3 minutes later. Everything appeared normal. Except. There was no record of Sarah's call. No caller ID. No recording. No incident log. Nothing. As if the conversation had never happened. I knew I hadn't imagined it. Because I'd written notes on a yellow legal pad beside my keyboard. Sarah Mitchell. 2:17 a.m. Blue wallpaper. Grandfather clock. Unknown address. Linda looked over. But I could see the doubt in their eyes. One detective finally asked. So you're saying the victim called you before she died? Yes. And then the phone system somehow erased the evidence? Yes. He closed his notebook. We'll let you know if we have more questions. They never called again. I couldn't let it go. 2 nights later, I drove to Willow Creek Road after my shift. The police tape was still there. The house was dark. Empty. A neighbor noticed me standing outside. You knew Sarah? No. I spoke to her once. The woman nodded sadly. Poor thing. Did she live alone? Most of the time. Most? Her husband traveled for work. My stomach tightened. Where is he now? The neighbor looked confused. He died 6 years ago. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? He was killed in a highway accident. She pointed toward the house. Sarah never remarried. That wasn't possible. During our call, she'd repeatedly referred to him. Someone inside the house. Someone climbing the stairs. If her husband had been dead for 6 years, who had she been hiding from? The following week, I requested permission to review archived emergency calls. Officially, I was searching for a technical issue. Unofficially, I wanted proof that Sarah had existed. The IT technician gave me access to the backup server. Thousands of recordings. Every emergency call. Every radio transmission. Every second preserved. Except between 2:16 a.m. and 2:21 a.m. on the night Sarah called. There was nothing. 5 full minutes were missing. Not corrupted. Not damaged. Simply gone. As though someone had cut them out of time itself. I started having trouble sleeping. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. my phone would light up. No ringtone. No vibration. Just the screen turning on by itself. Always showing unknown caller. Whenever I answered, silence. Then breathing. Fast. Shaky breathing. Exactly like Sarah's. One night, I decided not to answer. The phone stopped ringing after 20 seconds. A voicemail appeared. Duration 0:47. I pressed play. Static. Then, my own voice. County Emergency Dispatch. What's your emergency? I nearly dropped the phone. The recording continued. It was my side of Sarah's conversation. Only my voice. None of hers. At the very end, a whisper. Not mine. Not Sarah's. Just 4 words. You're answering too soon. The next morning, I returned to work exhausted. Linda noticed immediately. You look terrible. I haven't been sleeping. She smiled sympathetically. Take tomorrow off. Then she picked up her car keys. I need to leave a little early tonight. Every muscle in my body tightened. The words on my legal pad came rushing back. Don't let Linda leave tonight. I didn't know why. I didn't know from what. But I couldn't ignore it. Linda. Can you stay another hour? She laughed. Why? I couldn't tell her the truth. I need help finishing paperwork. She rolled her eyes. You owe me coffee. She put her keys back on the desk. At 10:43 p.m. a pickup truck ran a red light less than 2 blocks from the dispatch center. It slammed into the driver's side of a small sedan. The driver died instantly. Police later identified her. She was Linda's younger sister. Linda had originally planned to leave work 20 minutes earlier to meet her at that exact intersection. If she had, she would have been sitting in the passenger seat. For the first time, I realized the warning had saved her life. But it raised an even more terrifying question. Who had written it? Months passed. The phone calls stopped. Life slowly returned to normal. At least, I tried convincing myself it had. Then, nearly a year later, a detective contacted me. We reopened Sarah Mitchell's case. Why? We found something. He showed me a box recovered from the attic during renovations. Inside were old cassette tapes. Dozens of them. Each labeled with a date. The earliest. Sarah had been recording strange noises inside her house for years. Most tapes contained nothing unusual. Floorboards creaking. Wind. Old plumbing. Until the final cassette. Recorded the night before she died. The detective pressed play. At first, only silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Walking across wooden floors. Sarah whispered into the recorder. He's here again. Then, another voice answered. Calm. Gentle. Almost comforting. You called them too early. Sarah began crying. I was trying to save them. The voice replied. You already did. The tape ended. The detectives never identified the second voice. They assumed someone had been inside the house. No fingerprints were found. No forced entry. No DNA. No footprints. Nothing. I retired from emergency dispatch last year. People ask why I left. I usually tell them 12 years of night shifts was enough. The truth is simpler. I couldn't answer another phone. Not after what happened. Last month, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in black ink. No signature. It contained only one sentence. "Thank you for keeping Linda at work." Nothing else. No fingerprints. No postage stamp. The envelope had somehow been delivered by hand. Security cameras at my apartment building showed no one approaching my mailbox. The footage simply skipped 3 minutes. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd ignored the note. If Linda had left on time. If Sarah had never called. Maybe the future isn't fixed. Maybe someone, somewhere, is trying to change it. Or maybe, every now and then, a desperate voice finds its way through time, hoping that someone on the other end of the line will answer. Whenever my phone rings after midnight now, I let it ring until it stops. Because I'm terrified that one night, I'll hear my own voice whisper, "Please don't hang up." My shoulder. "Who are you looking for?" I showed her the notes. She frowned. "We never received that call." I did. She shook her head. "Line 4 never rang." I opened my mouth to argue. Then every radio in the dispatch center crackled at once. A deputy's voice came through. Calm. Professional. "Dispatch, we're responding to a reported homicide." Linda reached for the microphone. "Location?" The deputy answered. 142, Willow Creek Road. Then he added one more sentence. "The victim's identification is..." He paused. "Sarah Mitchell." I looked down at my notes. In the margin, without remembering writing them, I found 5 words. "Don't let Linda leave tonight." That I stared at the words on my legal pad. "Don't let Linda leave tonight." I didn't remember writing them. The handwriting was mine. Every letter. Every curve. But I had no memory of picking up the pen. Linda noticed my expression. "What is it?" I quickly turned the pad over. Nothing. I don't know why I hid it. Maybe because I was afraid she'd think I was losing my mind. Or maybe because somewhere deep inside me, I believed the warning. The deputies arrived at 142, Willow Creek Road at 3:41 a.m. The house sat at the end of a quiet street on the eastern edge of the county. Small. 2-story. Blue wallpaper visible through the front hallway. A grandfather clock stood beside the staircase. Exactly as Sarah had described. The front door was unlocked. Inside, they found Sarah Mitchell. She was lying at the bottom of the stairs. The medical examiner later ruled her death a homicide. Time of death: approximately 3:35 a.m. Nearly 80 minutes after she'd spoken to me. None of it made sense. How could she have described a crime scene? Before it happened, detectives interviewed everyone working that night. When it was my turn, I told them everything. The strange call. The missing recording. The warning. Most of them remained polite.